in that moment, you're like, you still have this little twinge that like, it feels wrong what you're doing, but you just do it anyway. And you're like, honestly, like that wasn't bad. Like, I don't
Right,
what
right.
I don't feel guilty about this. Like,
Yeah.
I kind of feel guilty that I don't feel guilty. You know what I mean? It's just like,
Dear Shandy. Welcome back to Dear Shandy, listeners. Hello, Andy.
Hello.
How are you today?
Great.
Ooh, great.
Yeah.
You seem very eager and perked up to talk about
This is an
purity
exciting
culture
topic.
today.
Yeah, I'm very, very pumped.
Yeah, I've got to tell you that this topic is something that I've been trying to make happen on this podcast for a very long time. And that's why I'm so excited about our guest today. We are joined today by Blair, the ex-evangelical brains behind the humorous Instagram and TikTok accounts at Talk Purity to me. Mm-hmm. Amazing name. I'm sure you get that all the time, but just
thank
really
you
clever.
so much.
And her accounts are dedicated to unlearning the shame taught by purity culture. Yes. And from what I understand, there's a lot. And so I have two disclaimers that I just want to get out of the way. The first is, before we get started, none of us here are therapists. And this is intended as a conversation with anecdotal advice and observations, but it just isn't meant to be in lieu of professional treatment or therapy. Just want to get that out of the way. And next up, my disclaimer next is for you, Blair, because neither Andy or I know much about purity culture, if I'm honest.
We don't know much about purity. I couldn't resist.
Exactly. And neither of us were raised in particularly religious households. And after reading up on it a lot and just sort of being informed by our listeners more about it, I consider myself very lucky to not know much about it, but we're just so happy that you have joined us today because I know you know plenty. And it really has been a major theme among our listeners' emails and questions about their relationships. And when I did tease that we were having you on, the response was really very passionate.
And that's so sweet.
Yeah, it's very sweet. And you have been at this for a while, so I imagine that probably doesn't surprise you.
Well, I mean, I know that a lot of people obviously are, drawn to what I do and talk about. So yeah, I mean, I'm always kind of like, it's not lost on me, like that people do value what I put out there. And I'm always constantly just like surprised and feel very grateful. So
yeah, what you do resonates. We'll put it that way. Okay, so just to get started, because I want to make sure everyone's on the same page, and in case anyone's listening and just has no idea what we're talking about, or maybe they think that the way they view their bodies and sexuality today could be influenced by having been raised with purity culture, I just want to get a definition like on the books. Would you mind defining it for us? I know you've been asked this before, but just so we're all on the same page.
Yeah. And of course, my definition comes from the evangelical world that shows up in different places and looks different and different like religions and stuff like that. But for me, it's, this ideology that places a lot of emphasis on virginity and saving yourself for marriage, putting air quotes around that there, and really places a lot of worth, especially for women, on not showing their body, saving that for their future husband. It's definitely very like heteronormative and monogamous, sort of like emphasis on like those types of relationships being like the only valid ones. So there's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Unpack, but
yes, it is. And so I just, a fun, I'm going to add some air quotes there, fun little true or false. True or false then, in purity culture, as a woman, you must be faithful to your husband every single day of your life, including before you even know or meet him.
Oh, for sure. Very true.
True or false, to even have a crush on someone is a sin and an act of betrayal to one's future spouse?
A lot of people, including myself, were taught that. Yeah.
Wow.
True.
Okay. True or false, women's worth is in their virginity. So on a subconscious level, losing their virginity is to lose their worth.
Very true. Yes.
Okay. Whew. Okay,
Rough
just setting the
stuff.
tone here. And true or false, to have sex before marriage is to be damaged goods.
Definitely true. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
healthy.
first we want to get to know you a bit. I've been very curious about you. I've been following your account for quite some time and really enjoy it. Just sharing what you're comfortable sharing. Can you tell us a bit about your background and upbringing and how purity culture affected you?
Yeah, I would say purity culture in the churches. I grew up in like the Southern Baptist Church. It's kind of a thing that's all around you. It's kind of like the air, it's just kind of like always there.
Wow.
And then like when you get a little older, it's definitely more explicit, like the messages about, especially when you're like, around that 12 years old through high school, like puberty. You start getting into like youth group, puberty age. Yeah. Like it's very much, it gets more explicit at those ages about like, what girls are allowed to wear to church and are allowed to wear like around men, even like family. It can be like, it's a lot of modesty, being taught a lot about modesty and, keeping your legs closed and not tempting those boys, or like even young girls being told not to like tempt men in their churches and things like that. Like, so that's kind of like the tone, if we're just like putting it out there, like that's what I grew up with and like very much internalized. And it kind of like, if you're involved in ministry in college, it continues on. So it's like a solid decade of your life where you're really like hammered with these messages.
And talk about formative years.
Right. And just when your hormones are hammering you at the other side.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Good timing, I guess.
It's not like it's a decade between 35 and 45.
Like now you've had all that sex. Now let's talk about purity.
Yeah. Oh, man.
So did you ever personally, well, not did you ever, was there a period from whence this began to a certain time where you fully embraced it, where you're like, this is right and I feel good about this and I'm not tempted?
Oh, yeah. I was like very much so all in. Like I really believed this and tried my best to live it wholeheartedly. Like I was very much of the camp that took it to like the extremes of, I don't even want to kiss till I get married, all of that stuff. Like I really was fully bought in on all of it. And I thought like this was the best way to live. This was like the only way to please God, which is what I wanted to do more than anything. And I was totally sold out to the whole thing. I was completely in it.
So there were no nights of doubt where you were just like,
I'm
wait,
curious.
this is something here is not right. I have felt this temptation the other day. I would really love to explore that, but I can't.
Yeah.
Was it like that? Or were you just full on, just 100%?
The only times, no, I mean, really, no. I will say that until I really started having like doubts about my faith, which is, intertwined into this whole conversation, I really never questioned it because I was being told by all the adults in my life that this is how I would please God. And like, this was God's best plan for my life. And I was totally fine with that. I had no other like experiences or information or anything to like challenge these ideas. It was just like, this is what was out there. So
yeah. Like you said, the air that you breathed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when and how did the cracks start forming? Like, when did you develop that doubt?
Yeah, kind of towards the end of college, I just sort of started realizing that, like, maybe the way that I related to, like, sexuality and relationships wasn't healthy. And it was, like, around the same sort of time that I was questioning my faith anyway. So it was, like, just, like, different. I think it was, like, different instances where I was like, maybe this isn't like the way that other people react to sexuality. And like, maybe the way that I'm reacting right now is not healthy. Like this doesn't seem like having this much anxiety about sex doesn't seem good.
Normal. Yeah. You were comparing it to other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to ask. Do you think it was a function of you being exposed to like the real world as an adult for a while? Or do you think was there some formative experience you had? Was there something you remember like, oh, this is where it turned?
Yeah. And I want to tack on a question to that. Did you go away for college? Did you leave town?
Yeah, that's a good
I
question.
did, yeah. Mhm. Yep, I went to public universities, so I didn't go to Christian college or anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So really seeing the rest of the world. Okay. Very interesting. Now, how many years now would you say you're into, as you call your deconstruction process? And are there any aspects that you find yourself still struggling with?
I would say probably a decade in, like from like the very beginning to like where I am now. I'm 31, so probably around age like 21 or so is where it started. So the thing about fundamentalism and like purity culture, especially when you grow up in it, it really changes your brain, you know? So I think in a way, like I will probably never be like fully rid of like Christian fundamentalism and purity culture as like an extension of that, because it did change the way my brain developed as compared to like other people who grew up without it. And I don't say that to be like negative. I think it's just like an understanding for myself that like there is a reason why I still struggle with certain things. Like, you know, there's like sometimes just like a guilt you feel, or like, you know, questioning like why you're doing certain things. Like, it's not anything glaring, I would say, like, but it's just kind of like an undercurrent of like the way that I was raised and the way that like those ideologies shaped literally the way my brain works.
That's incredible how it's been 10 years of your deconstruction process. And before that, you know, let's say about 10 years since that messaging was really being driven home, let's say from age 11 or so, even though I know really it goes even younger than that. It's just, I mean, it's a year for a year and you're still, as you said, like it's a part of you.
Yeah. Like, do I wish that it didn't have to be that way? Yeah, for sure. But I am the person that I am, and I'm like grateful to have survived everything that I did. And like, I am glad to be where I am in my life right now. And like, I know that it doesn't like control me or like define who I am, that I now like have the opportunity to learn and define the rest of my life. So like it, again, that's why I say like, for anyone who's listening, like who maybe doesn't like that I would say that about like the way it shaped me, I don't see it as a negative. It's just like, this is me.
Yeah, no, I mean, it adds such value to the work you've done. And I mean, how well you probably know yourself if you have to be forced to go on that journey in your early 20s. I mean, you really have to get to know yourself and trust your own inner compass over what all the adults in the room have been telling you for your entire youth, really. It's pretty incredible.
Do you mind me asking, I don't know if it's too personal, but was your first experience really like terrifying sexually?
It was honestly just kind of like, I think I just kind of dissociated and like don't really remember a lot. Like there was some things that were scary, yeah, but I think like a lot of it, I was just so like, I didn't know what was happening, that it was like not really terrifying. It was just kind of like, I don't really remember a lot. Like I don't remember how I felt really. I just kind of like blacked out kind of.
Wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's such a shock to the system, I'm sure. And I mean, just all the voices in your head, it's almost like they all negate each other and then you just don't remember anything.
Yeah, it's like skydiving or something.
Skydiving.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
So what inspired you to start Talk Purity to Me?
Yeah, so around like September of 2019, I kind of, on my own personal Instagram, which is just, you know, a small private account, I just put something out there and said, you know, hey, you know, for anyone out there who was raised in purity culture, like how has it affected you in your adult life? Because I was obviously still contending with it in my own relationships and like my life, and just sort of wanted to see like how everyone else was doing, kind of like, how everyone who grew up in the same way was feeling about it. And I got dozens and dozens of messages. And again, I just have like a small account. So it was like an overwhelming kind of response from my followers on there, like my friends. And so just me, like my personality, I'm kind of like, if I see a problem, I'm like, okay, like, is there a way I can fix this? Or is there like, can I find someone who can like help or whatever? So I sort of started like exploring different options. And I just felt like, well, this started on Instagram. Let me just like make a separate account and just, put some thoughts out there. And like anyone who's interested in talking about this, like can go over on this other account and we can sort of get the conversation going. And that's how it started. So
Okay.
I have one last personal question before I get into the other stuff. But I'm just curious, and I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm curious. Okay. How did your family and your friends from your hometown receive this?
Such a good question. I can't believe I didn't think to ask that. Yes.
Well, many of them didn't know for a long time, maybe still don't know, because I preemptively blocked many people.
Good for you. No, seriously.
I just went in there. I was like, you know what? I just don't like many of the people. Like I am not friends with a single person that I went to church with. Mm-hmm. I don't have a relationship with them. And I'm like, I don't have a personal relationship with any of these people. So I'm not going to let them like see this page and think they can like speak into my life this many years later and like give their unsolicited opinion. I just don't even want to deal with it. So I just blocked a bunch of people before I even like made a post. I was like, you know what? I am protecting my peace right now. So that's what I did.
What about your parents?
Yeah.
My parents, actually, my mom follows me and she comments on stuff sometimes.
How lovely.
So, I mean, she's like, my mom's a public, like high school teacher. Like, she sees like what teenagers go through. And I will say, like, I have kind of a different experience with purity culture. Like, I would say that it was less pushed on me by my parents and more by, I attended this house church with like my best friend. It was in my best friend's home. And it was like her parents, like my best friend's parents, who kind of like put this messaging on me. So like, it's not really a thing that I like associate with my parents.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, exactly. No, so it's like, it's not, and that's not true for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I was going to say, you're lucky to have that relationship now with your parents regarding this.
Yes. I feel very lucky. Yeah. And like, I don't talk about that aspect of it a lot because I know like family is a very painful thing for a lot of people who grew up like the way that I did. But I feel very lucky that like I do still have a really good relationship with my parents. And
nice.
I did for a while there through like my, like, especially like mid to late 20s, I didn't feel like I could be fully open with them, but like I started to open up to them a bit more, I guess, and like sharing things like my page and, living with my fiance, like things like that. But they live in a different state. So it wasn't even like, it was kind of a non-issue for a while, and which was nice while I figured out how I wanted to talk about it.
I would say you are on the lucky side for sure.
I'm very lucky, yeah.
Well, Andy.
Yes.
It's officially spring. I think we can all agree spring is in full swing.
No better time than for some spring cleaning.
Of the
mind.
We, of course, are talking about Talkspace. Talkspace. It's a good name.
It's a great name.
Catchy.
It's amazing that name didn't exist before.
Yeah, can you imagine how excited the founders of Talkspace were when they were like, oh my God, no one has Talkspace.com.
Well, that's what you think. It might have been some guy like camping out from the late 90s. It's like, yeah, I'll give you Talkspace for $10 million. You're like, damn it.
Anyway, Talkspace is a magnificent platform designed to connect you with your perfect therapist or maybe psychiatrist or maybe even couples therapist. I love that about Talkspace is they have a little bit of everything.
Runs the gamut. They have an online questionnaire, which is fantastic. Basically just say, this is what I am. This is my problems.
This is what I need.
What do you got for me?
Yeah, they match you up, and you can talk with a licensed therapist 24/7 with Talkspace. You do not even
Incredible.
need an appointment. I love that idea of full accessibility because, people are going through it.
Yeah.
Things are hard.
Sometimes you need a hotline.
You do.
Yeah. You just can't abide by the 9 to 5 for your problems.
It's true. And honestly, I think finding your perfect therapist is a daunting task.
I think that's one of the things that turns people away from therapy. They may give it a shot and be like, oh, this is too much.
Yeah, exactly. It's there's a needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
It could really help to have your preferences, your needs funneled down to your options.
Finding a therapist is kind of like blind dating,
Yeah.
but Talkspace allows you to see.
Ooh, nice, Andy. You just come up with that now. So consider this your permission slip to put your mental health first.
Match with your dedicated therapist today at Talkspace.com.
And use promo code Shandy at sign up to get a whopping $100 off your first month.
That's $100 off at Talkspace.com, promo code Shandy.
Okay, so having run Talk Purity to me for a couple years now, what have been the common themes you've seen from your followers, from people writing in, of how it has affected them long term, like the damage it has caused?
A big one is just like a lot of people who got married young because of purity culture, their marriages didn't work long term. So that's a big one, and learning, maybe you get married when you're like 20, 21, and then by the time you're in your mid to late 20s, you're already divorced and like you're trying to figure out life again, and like being a single person, like coming from purity culture is really hard. Trying to navigate relationships and things like that can be really hard for a lot of people. So that's a big one. I mean, a lot of purity culture marriages really just don't work.
I have a quick question about that, and this might be a really stupid question, but like I said at the top,
Yeah.
I am ignorant in this department, and I love it when people can admit that they don't know stuff, so I try to be that person. I don't know much about this. But when you say a lot of purity culture marriages, they tend to take place at such a young age, is that just sort of like trying to speed it along? Is that because they want to have sex, or is it because it is? So that's the reason they want to have sex.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, they want to have sex and they
Andy's giving me a what's wrong with you look. I was just curious, I don't know. Like I thought maybe that was a factor. I didn't think that was the main reason why you got married so young. I don't know. Because there's also all this messaging that sex is bad. So until you're married.
But not inside of marriage.
Not inside of marriage.
Sex is great inside of marriage. It's a double whammy.
We're going to circle.
Like you're unbelievably horned up and everyone's telling you this is the best thing you could do.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's my question, and this wasn't on my list, but just based on what you said, people getting divorced as early as their late 20s after having gotten married so young. What's worse? To get divorced? Because isn't divorce also frowned upon?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, that's also really hard for a lot of people. I would say probably the worst thing you could do, like really, it's mostly for women, like getting pregnant or having sex before you're married is probably the worst thing you could do.
Okay. It's number one on Family Feud.
Number one, getting pregnant before marriage.
Andy likes to turn everything into a Family Feud.
It helps.
So divorce is like third?
Yeah, divorce is like 6% of the correspondence.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely not like accepted. Like it's not great, but I, I mean, it obviously happens, even like famous pastors get divorced now. So.
Okay.
Yeah. The most fun stuff is the worst. Anything that's super fun,
more fun it
is the worst.
So is there a particular age range that you have found you get the most responses from, or does it really just run the gamut among your followers? I'm just curious.
It's definitely the like 18 to 45 sort of range. I mean, I have analytics, so I can see that,
Yeah. Same. not in the same way, but okay. And have any responses you've gotten taken you by surprise? Have there been any unexpected challenges running an account like this? I'm curious.
I would say that I don't know that it's necessarily a response that is specific to me. I think a lot of people who have platforms, followings, whatever you want to call it, probably struggle with this. But like in the church, you know, there's a lot of like emphasis on like accountability, and you like build these really strong bonds with people like in your church group. And I think sometimes people like translate that sort of idea onto me, who is a stranger on the internet. And so I get a lot of,
but they feel like they know you.
They feel like they know me. And like, I feel very like humbled by that. And like, I feel it's an honor that people would trust me with like very deeply personal things. But also sometimes people just have expectations of me, or like my time, or what I'm willing to give to them, like as an individual. That can be really hard to
I can imagine.
Welcome to the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, welcome to the internet.
Yes.
Such a good song.
So,
And okay, last one in this, I have a lot of questions. This is a sub one to that first question about the common themes, but are there any less obvious ways that you personally think purity culture manifests? Or do you think you've said them all already?
I mean, I think like even things like, you remember the whole story about Mike Pence, like not wanting to be alone with another woman, like even a colleague or something like that. Like, to me, that is just like peak purity culture too. Like that's, you know, I remember being told that, like not to be alone in a room with a guy, or like in a car with a man, you know, just like not being alone ever. Like, I mean, when I heard that, I was like, yeah, obviously he's a Christian. He's in this world. Like, this is not, if you're in that world, that's not a crazy idea. Like for everyone else looking in, it seems very out there. But like when you come from that world, that's normal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can Mike Pence still be helped, or is he lost?
No, I mean, he's walking the straight and narrow. He's not alone with any women, right? So he's doing
Okay, so a major theme in the questions we received, because of course I did poll our listeners, and we always like to incorporate our listeners' questions into the questions we ask our guests. And a major theme, which we already kind of touched on, was that idea that sex is bad, to suddenly sex is a beautiful part of marriage. Like all of a sudden, literally overnight, this thing that you've been taught was so evil is suddenly so accepted. And based on the responses we got, this seems to be a struggle for a lot of people in that they cannot shed the shame and anxiety they have surrounding sex from before they were married. And even though they're married now and it's all kosher, it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, understandable.
Do you have any tips for beginning to shift that mindset for anyone struggling?
I think having a good relationship with yourself, like, I don't know, like what I can say. Am I just like allowed to say anything?
Yeah, say whatever you want. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like
Your
I think like
you're good.
Okay. I mean, masturbation is really helpful because you get to figure out like what works for you, and it really does like help a lot. I mean, for me, in my experience, and like for hearing other people's stories, like that's a big one. Like even just the act of buying clothes that like you feel good in it seems so simple, but it's actually super revolutionary for a lot of people. Like just like going and trying on clothes like that make you feel like happy and like beautiful and like good about your body, no matter what, like whatever size or whatever you are. Like it's just like you just take your power back in like small moments. I don't think it's like a big overnight epiphany thing. I mean, maybe that happens for some people, and if so, that's amazing. But I think you just like slowly take your power back and like stand up for yourself in like the smallest moments, take your autonomy back, like celebrate yourself. I think that is like the biggest thing that I can say.
Yeah.
I'm curious in this community. I this is a very common conception, but you always hear about these like super sexually repressed societies where there's these crazy sexual deviancies, right? Deviance?
Yeah.
Is that a word? Deviancies?
Deviancies?
Deviances? Deviant?
Are you talking about deviant? Like
deviances. Like the act, the noun, deviance. That's an
is
interesting
deviance
question.
a noun?
Can you... Deviances.
I don't know, but I know what you,
We know what he means. We know what he means.
Read.
I know what you mean.
Okay, so what I'm asking you is like, is that something that you've seen in this community where it's just like you go from 0 to 100, you're like in full BDSM from nothing? Like, is that something that actually does happen a lot, or is that the really rare exception?
Well, I don't know like what everyone is up to, you know? I mean, it could be.
You know what a lot of people are up to.
I don't think that is very common, I will say.
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of people who, you know, leave purity culture and they figure out that is exactly what they enjoy. And that is like their preference is be it BDSM or ethical non-monogamy or whatever, you know, there's like, and then there's, you know, people like me who leave purity culture and decide that, you know, my taste and stuff is still like kind of vanilla. Like I'm not really like, you know, I think that's like what's a misconception is like not everyone leaves purity culture and is just like, woo, like, you know, going in every direction and try up for everything, you know?
Right.
And especially like as a woman talking about sex on the internet, I think that people have that conception of me. And I think people would be very surprised to know that like, that's not true.
Isn't that interesting how the human mind works? It's like, oh, well, you speak out against purity culture. You must be X,
the
Y, Z.
exact opposite of
it's
purity
like you
culture.
cannot, there can't be any gray area. I need to be able to categorize these. The idea that some people, I mean, BDSM is an extreme example, but I feel like this is something I've long thought that if you are so repressed in a certain way that when you do go off to college, I think some people would be inclined to swing harder in the opposite direction than they otherwise might have out of an act of rebellion.
I think that's true. I think for some people it can be true. You know, you have no education about STIs or sexual health. Like you really don't know what you're doing. So, I mean, unfortunately, because of purity culture and a lack of sex education in the US, a lot of people learn about sex by having sex, which is really not great. But yeah, I mean, I think that is true for a lot of people.
Yeah. Let's say now you grew up in purity culture, but your partner did not. And perhaps that manifests in the bedroom today. Maybe you're married, maybe you're not. But some of our listeners, the Shandies, expressed feeling closed off or almost like a prude in response to sexual suggestions from their partner. Do you have any advice for those in this position to be more open to exploration or just more comfortable with their sexuality?
I really do think like sexual exploration, even on your own, can be really helpful. I know I already mentioned that. But even like watching like sexy movies or like playing, you know, whatever, like even if you're not into pornography, like I totally understand it's not for everyone, but like if that is something you're open to, like, you know, finding some like ethical pornography you can watch that like maybe might, you know, like might make you feel a little bit more excited.
Randy.
Like, yeah, like
word.
I think it is difficult for people to, like you were saying, like you know, we're all taught that as soon as we get married, like the floodgates will open and everything will be magical and we'll have like so much sexual drive. And that's just really not true for a lot of people for various reasons. And yeah, I mean, I think that it's okay. It's normal given what we've all been through for a lot of people, but it's, you know, it's okay to take it slow too. And like, don't feel, I would say like, give yourself time. If you've got a partner who is being impatient with you, that's probably not the person that you need to be with, or they just need a serious reality check about, you know, your history, and just you don't have to get there today. It's it's going to be okay. Give yourself all the time you need.
Yeah. I always think of a line from Sex and the City. I'm a Sex and the City generation person, but
I love Sex and the City.
Samantha
once.
Oh yeah?
I watched it like in the last 4 years. So I've known,
oh my God, wow. Okay. You caught up. That's great.
I also love Sex in the City.
Yes. Yeah.
Andy knows more Sex in the City than he'd like to admit.
Yeah,
but
I've been indoctrinated.
I mean, I wasn't raised in purity culture, but I mean, it was extremely eye-opening for someone like me. I feel like I was a little bit sheltered, I guess. And, in my later teen years, watching a show like that in a city like New York, I was just like, this exists? Like, it was sort of mind-blowing. It wasn't as like, this is wrong. It was more like, I didn't, you just sort of need that door to be opened a crack. And then you're like, oh, what's through here? Okay. So, anyway, my point in bringing up Sex and the City is Samantha Jones. You may not know this, but she famously said that she's a trisexual and that she'll try anything once. Is that this? Am I getting that
close
wrong?
Enough. I get the point.
No, that's right.
That's
I think I recently watched that episode.
Yeah.
Like last week.
Yeah. It just got me thinking. I remember seeing it and being like,
yeah.
Oh,
why not?
I mean, she seems pretty happy. Okay. So let's say someone is staying with their first and only sexual partner, even though it's not good or healthy or right, the relationship itself, simply because of their fear of leaving and what that would look like. What would you say to that person?
I would say that you are in charge of exactly the kind of sexual life that you want to have. And just it is as hard as it's going to be to leave. If you know that whatever situation you're in isn't right, figure out a way to leave. And if there's some other things going on and it's not safe, talk to people, but you have the power to choose exactly what you want your sex life to look like, whether that is, the BDSM, or whether you do want a monogamous relationship, like that's healthy and, empowering, like as difficult as it may feel. And as it does make you feel like you're losing control to let go of relationships like that. Like, it's like, you feel like you're going to spiral and like, you're never going to find up again, but you will. It might take some time, but
it feels like so much of it is about finding your community, like your tribe of people. Like, I can imagine how much harder it would be to leave that kind of relationship if all your friends were also raised in the same culture and are also, would judge you for leaving.
Yeah. Out of peer pressure.
Yeah. I mean, I would have a hard time with that. That would be tough.
Would.
It's almost like you need to start chipping away at other facets of your life, not only your romantic relationship, but the circle that you surround yourself with. It's
tough.
I mean, tough.
Sometimes it like I knew a Jehovah's Witness who pieced out and nobody speaks to her. I mean, no sisters, no family, no friends, nobody.
Have you heard some stories like that?
For sure, yeah. And Jehovah's Witness is very famous for that. They have a whole process of, I think they call it disfellowshipping, but that happens to a lot of people, and it is excruciating. There's the stories that I hear are just incredibly painful, and I would never make light of that. That the choice to leave is so difficult, and I would never encourage someone to leave who wasn't ready, or who felt because for a lot of people, the choice to leave relationships like that, if you're in a marriage, especially if you have kids, you're probably leaving your family network, other social networks. You might even be leaving financial stability. It is not an easy thing to do. So I would never encourage anyone who wasn't fully prepared for that to just do it on a whim. It's not an easy thing at all.
Mm-hmm. You said earlier, just about the previous question, if you know it's not right. it got me thinking just how, like, the role trust plays in all of this, and how that kind of mindset, especially from such a young age, it almost teaches you not to trust your own instincts and not trust your gut, not trust yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it made me kind of sad. Like, even if you think about what you're looking for in a relationship, you're taught that if someone's let's say you're a woman, you're heterosexual, and you were taught that it has to be a man of God, right? It can't. Like, if it's not a man of God, then he can't be right for you. But it's like, there's no sense of discovering for yourself what may or may not be right for you.
Oh, for sure. And I don't even think that I knew what, like, my own intuition or whatever was until maybe like my mid-20s. Like, I don't even think I knew how to know what I wanted.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know, like, how to listen to that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any tips for how you came to hear that voice?
I think I just sort of had to, like, stop caring, like, as much as, like, like, I had already lost a lot of relationships by that point. So I was just like, you know what? This is where I am. And, like, if I lose other people too, like, maybe that's what's going to happen. And I was just at a point in my life where I was like, I can't keep listening to everybody else. I have to, like, figure out what's even going on. Cause I felt like I did feel very, like, out of control of my life. I was like, I have to just stop listening to everyone else, stop caring what everyone else thinks, which wasn't easy for me to do.
Yeah.
But I think I just slowly, like, I am very much of an introvert. I spent a lot of time alone, like, in my home, like,
you turned off the noise.
Just, like, and, like, exploring different things, like going on dates. It was still very much the like, dating app scene. I don't know if people still use dating apps a lot, but, like, that's that sweet spot of,
I think they might.
just, like, trying different things, like, even if it was, like, kind of intimidating, just sort of putting myself out there.
Expanding your horizons.
Yeah.
Was there a movie you saw? Like, I want to know. I asked this question before. I don't think you answered, but you interrupted me.
I'm sorry.
But can you pinpoint just one early formative experience? Was it like a movie you saw, or a book you read, or some friend you met, or, like, was there anything you can pinpoint that started the train?
When I was in high school and, like, most of college, I never put out the vibe that I was, like, wanting to date, because I was waiting on my, like, future husband, right? Like, that's what I was supposed to do. But as I started, like, meeting new people, like, kind of putting myself out there a little bit more, I did start having, like, more people, like, asking me out, interested, hanging out with guys, like, different stuff like that. And I think just, like, in that moment, you're like, you still have this little twinge that, like, it feels wrong what you're doing, but you just do it anyway. And you're like, honestly, like, that wasn't bad. Like, I don't I don't feel guilty about this. Like, I kind of feel guilty that I don't feel guilty. You know what I mean? It's just like, and then you just start realizing, like, this is actually not the, like, big, terrible, scary, huge thing that I made this in my head because of everything I was taught. So that, like, probably around that time, just sort of, like, not realizing it wasn't, like, everything that I had built it up to be.
You pulled the curtain back. You saw the Wizard of Oz.
It's actually a fascinating time, I think. I mean, sure, for everyone, but especially, like, as a straight woman at that age, like, when you do start to, you do break away from the home life and you do start getting advances from the opposite sex, it's kind of like you don't really see yourself through that lens up until that point. And to be able to do it is suddenly, like, and again, I wasn't raised in purity culture, so I can't even speak to that, but just even as a moderately sheltered person, it was kind of like, oh, I'm seen this way. Like, I'm like I never even saw it in the mirror. It was more like I came to regard how I came off to other people through how I was treated at that point in my life. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
It's a powerful time, honestly.
Sure is.
Yeah.
So, Andy, we live in an age where there is an app, a quote unquote app for just about everything. Yeah. But I really feel one of the ways in which that concept shines the most is in terms of finding healthcare.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's really crazy to think that you would just Google finding an OBGYN, maybe, for example.
No one teaches you how to do this stuff.
No.
Like when I was a kid, I used to think when I grow up, how am I going to learn how to like fly on planes? And do all that stuff is easy.
Yeah.
Finding a doctor is hard.
It's true. And that's why we love ZocDoc.
Yeah.
They make it so easy to find the perfect doctor for you. And I love how they really prioritize the feedback from other patients. Because, those are to be heeded.
Crowdsourcing.
Yes.
Reviews is so important.
Yes.
And useful.
Yes.
We use it for everything.
We do.
We really use it.
We use that same concept when deciding where to eat.
And it almost always works.
It does. And so why would you not use a similar...
For your health.
Yes.
For your body. For your life.
Yeah. I found my current doctor here in New York with ZocDoc, and it did not lead me astray. I've been very pleased.
You're still here?
Yay, ZocDoc.
It's in the pudding.
Perhaps most importantly, with ZocDoc, you can not only book your appointment, that's so huge, you don't need to call.
Big.
Second of all, you can see right off the bat who accepts your insurance. So you can search based on who accepts your type of insurance. That's how I found my doctor. I had to search through my specific insurance, and then she popped up.
So go to ZocDoc.com/Shandy and download the ZocDoc app for free.
Then start your search for a top-rated doctor today.
Many are available within 24 hours.
That's ZocDoc.com/Shandy.
ZocDoc.com/Shandy.
Andy, what kind of a world do we live in?
We are living in a digital world.
Yes.
And I'm a digital girl.
Yes, you are. We live in a world where you need a website. How can you not have a website?
You're not a full person without a website.
Once upon a time, maybe you were, but
Maybe.
No longer. No. And that's where Squarespace comes in. We're huge fans and longtime fans of Squarespace.
Longtime users.
Gotta mention, our wedding website was on Squarespace.
Oh, yeah.
If anyone's curious, it was shandy.nyc.
Good name.
Long before we ever had Dear Shandy.
That's true.
It was shandy.nyc.
Yeah.
So Squarespace is a wonderful platform for designing websites. They give you everything you could possibly need to make a gorgeous and professional looking site. You know, there's so many website makers out there, but they don't all look professional.
No. And people judge. People judge.
Instill fear in them, Andy.
Yes. Don't be judged for an inferior website.
Yeah, with Squarespace, they have just such great templates. They're so beautiful. They're so versatile. And I love how it even funnels down. You could be like, oh, I'm starting a blog. Or no, I'm an artist. I want to show my work. And then they give you templates based on what you're looking for. And then you really just plug and play. You put in your images, your content. And I swear it's lickety split.
It really is the easiest. And I'll tell you something I've used a while ago. I used a competitor very briefly.
Oh, I remember this. It was a saga.
And I remember I got on the site. I hadn't used one of these before. Yeah. So I got on and I was like, oh my God, look at all these templates. Yeah. One of these is going to be great.
Yeah.
And I went through every single template. I was like, I didn't like any of those templates.
Yeah, what good is 100 templates if you don't like any of them?
Exactly, and Squarespace nails that.
Squarespace is actually too far in the opposite direction almost. Like I can never choose. Yeah, I usually have like 5 templates I like, and I'm like, oh, it's like
totally
Sophie's choice.
That's wow. That's a real first world Sophie's choice.
And really, depending on what the purpose is of your website, they have you covered in terms of features from every single angle, whether you're selling product, whether it is more of a gallery of your works, if you have a service that you need people would book you through, or if you have a blog, whatever you could possibly need in terms of building and running a professional and gorgeous website, they have you covered.
So head to squarespace.com/Shandy for a free trial.
And when you're ready to launch, use offer code Shandy to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
That's squarespace.com/Shandy.
So do you have any advice for anyone going through this process of trying to take control and love their bodies more and maybe just expand their horizons, like you said, while maintaining a meaningful relationship with loved ones, with family who maybe don't approve, because it's kind of a delicate balance. You can't just block them. Do you have any tips? I know that you didn't really go through that with your parents, but maybe you've spoken with people who have some advice.
Yeah, I mean, I went through it a little bit with my parents in the sense that I wasn't sure how they would react to certain decisions I was making for myself. And so I didn't open up to them about that. And, you know, honestly, it worked for me. And I would say that just because it's your parents or your family or whatever doesn't mean that they have to know everything about your life. Like, you get to maintain whatever level of privacy you would like to have, you know, like your parents don't have to have a full access to every detail of your life that you aren't comfortable sharing. And especially if you want to have a good relationship with them and you know that maybe right now is not the best time to like share certain things, like I would say don't feel like you have to. Like you don't owe full disclosure to anyone. Like you don't have to tell everyone all your business if you don't want to.
No, it's true. You're at this point, you're an autonomous adult.
Yeah.
And
on a need-to-know basis. Everybody else.
What you just said, Blair, reminded me of what my therapist told me just in a recent session, just about how hard it is to shed, you know, it could be from your childhood, the kind of relationship you have always wanted to have with your parents. And maybe as you get older, you realize that that just cannot come to be because maybe reasons like this or just personality incompatibilities. Maybe that is a challenge for some people, but I really loved your advice. You know, you don't need to disclose everything just because they're your parents. And maybe it is a chapter, like maybe down the road you can have that relationship. But yeah.
Speaking of relationships, I'm curious about the relationship with the one upstairs.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's kind of like part and parcel, this purity and the religion.
Yeah.
It's not like they're two separate paths you can take. So when you do...
I have that question.
Oh, you have it?
Yeah.
Nice.
Ask
Good
it,
job.
Andy.
She got it.
I have it
she
on here
found
for you.
it first. So my question is do you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater? Like if you choose to just disavow purity, do you also kind of have to disavow the religious basis for where that purity came from?
Yeah, and two-parter question, because I just want to add, if you're comfortable sharing, where would you say your relationship with religion stands today?
Yeah, so I will say for me, I could no longer be a part of religion, especially Christianity. I'm not interested in it in my own life. I don't want any part of it. Anyone else who wants to do that, I think that's awesome. Go for it. Don't use it as a weapon against other people. But other than that, like, I don't really care what other people want to do. I do think for a lot of people, it is hard to separate Christianity and purity culture. Because like you said, they do just go like hand in hand for a lot of us. But I also have friends who are very anti-purity culture and are still Christian or still have some kind of like relationship to Christianity or spirituality that's important to them. And I think that's awesome. It's not me, but I think that's great for them that they, you know, have found what works for them.
And do you think that the purity aspect of religion that you were indoctrinated with or by? Indoctrinated with or by?
Indoctrinated. Oh, is it with or by? Are you indoctrinated by something?
I say into indoctrinated.
Oh, nice. Good compromise. So
she uses the word more. I trust her.
Yeah, you're now our grammar proctor.
I don't know if I'm right. But.
So based on the fact that, you know, the purity culture that was so ingrained in your religious experience, did you feel that when you dropped the purity, were you like, it all has to go at the same time? Was that the decision that you made then, or was it a slow process after the whole purity thing was disavowed?
Yeah, and I want to know what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Well, I think it slowly was it wasn't to me, they're the same. So it's like such a big part of the religion that's like, I slowly was like just leaving all of it. It wasn't like one or the other. It was like I was just slowly like backing out of the door of like the whole thing. Like it wasn't like a partitioned, one or the other. It was the same.
Yeah, I agree with, like, I see religion as like, it's like you can either look at it as like, I agree. It's either a la carte or it's a prefix menu, right? Like if it's a prefix menu, you can't make that's it. You either take it or leave it.
Yeah, but
I don't believe in a la carte. I think it's either prefix or nothing.
But I really think that, some people don't necessarily want to lose their relationship with God as they see it.
Sure.
And it might be a little too much to try and be like, throw the baby out with the bathwater.
You can have a spiritual relationship with something.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, if you're going to go by an organized religion, I don't think you can a la carte it. Yeah. I don't think you can pick and choose what the things you want. And I'm not saying that I'm not. This is not a pro-religion
interesting
argument. What I'm saying is, I believe if you believe in a religion, you can't just say like, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this. I don't want to do that. I don't feel good about this. This is cool.
Yeah, but that's what so many people do in organized religion.
But I don't believe it.
Okay.
I think you got to go hardcore, full on fundamentalist or nothing.
I mean, for me, it was like like I said, I have zero interest in any of it. But for a lot of people, they do find something meaningful still in like aspects of Christianity. And I would never dream of telling them that they're wrong for doing that.
Yeah.
Nor would I.
Okay. So a couple more questions and then I promise we'll let you go. Do you think there's a correlation between being raised in purity culture and having difficulty orgasming?
I think that like for women or like people with a clitoris, like I think that it is a psychological thing. So in the psychological sense, like,
yes,
I think that it could be difficult to like get your mind there to the place where you're comfortable with like any kind of sexual contact or arousal. So I think I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't have a clitoris, but I would agree that that's probably the case.
As the person in this room with a clitoris, I can tell you it is extremely psychological.
You are an authority.
Okay. So beyond the shame and the fear and even the physical pain in some cases that become intertwined with sex, a lot of the consequences of purity culture seem to resemble PTSD. So panic attacks, depression, self-harm. Yeah. With this in mind, do you think purity culture is a form of abuse?
Yes, I do. Okay. Yep, for sure. I've talked about that for sure. Like, it's way back in my TikTok somewhere, but I've made videos about that.
Her TikTok's
like,
great.
Thank you so much. Yeah, like it's definitely, I mean, even there's people way more educated and, able to speak on this than I am. Sex educators, sex therapists who even compare it to like the effects of purity culture, also lining up a lot with the effects of sexual abuse and assault, like those types of things, like you're talking about the PTSD, Yeah. So for sure, I think it's a form of abuse and it's, a socially acceptable form because it's part of religion. And it's just like, people just think like, leave those people alone. Yeah. They're just practicing their religion, whatever. But I think that sex education is a human right. And denying that to people is abuse. And I agree with that. It is definitely abuse.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Final question. And this one came up a lot. This one was actually
the number one below. Family Feud question.
It was up there with like, how do you turn on a dime? Like, how do you regard sex as enjoyable after a lifetime of shame? And then in this case, it's a lot simpler. you are 10 years out of unlearning this. The question is, does it ever get better?
Yes, it does get better. I honestly can't believe that my life is the way it is right now. Like when I look back on like my 18-year-old self, like, having a panic attack the first time I held hands with a guy because I really thought that I cheated on my future husband. Like,
wow,
that's where I was. And I look at my life now, I'm like, it's just so different. And it's been a long journey, but yes, it does get better. And, I just, like I was saying earlier, I think in another question, like, you don't have to figure everything out all at once. Like, it's impossible. You're not going to figure out, like, if you're leaving your religion, especially, like, you're not going to figure out what you think about, like, spirituality and relationships and your career and friendships and everything, like, all at once. That's too much. Don't even think that you're going to be able to do that. Just, like,
one step
take it one day at a time.
Yeah. Love that message. Well, Blair, this was really just such a cool conversation. I'm so thankful that you carved out the time to share your personal anecdotes and also some advice with us. And just thank you so much.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Oh man, there's so much to unpack there.
Very eye-opening.
Yeah, I gotta say, I feel so lucky that I am as ignorant.
That you're not pure. You're very impure.
It's funny. My high school boyfriend, he actually wasn't Christian. He was a different religion, but he wanted to save himself for marriage. And I remember I was like young. I was like 17 or something. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. I had a very clear idea that I didn't. I kind of just wanted to try all the things and know and figure out what my own taste.
Normal upbringing. Like, that's what you want to do. That's you're listening to your hormones. Your hormones are right.
I do think I was a little sheltered in some ways, but when I hear stories like this, and so many of the questions we've gotten on this podcast have sort of alluded to this, or it'll be in passing, some sentence. It's like, I have a lot of shame and blah 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 thanks to XYZ, my upbringing, and I feel unqualified to take it on, if I'm honest, because I don't. And I know none of us are therapists here, but I do think it is helpful to hear from someone who she's 31. She started to branch out at 21, and like she said, you start being indoctrinated into it at around 12 years old. I just think it for her to be like, yeah, it does get better. It sounds so simple, but I do think that can be helpful for some people to hear.
She is an expert witness. That's what she is. She does not have a degree. She's not technically a professional, but she is a witness. And therefore an expert in my eyes.
I mean, is that not our entire podcast?
Yeah.
We're not relationship therapists.
We're just dumbasses.
We're just dumbasses who have dated a lot of people.
Yeah. Done a lot of dating and a lot of hot air.
Anyway, that was a really interesting conversation. Like, I did want to ask her more of like, do you have advice for this? Do you have advice for that? But I was like, I really had a hard time stopping asking her questions. Like you said, like, was there a movie you saw?
Yeah.
Like, what was the moment? What was the moment? It's so interesting to go from that being the air you breathe, the way she described it. It's so visceral.
I'm always fascinated by like anything of this genre. I'm always curious how a human brain from we were lucky enough to never be indoctrinated into any sort of crazy. I got it. I got it. Yeah. So I'll make a point. I learned, but we never had that.
Yeah.
We just had, sure, our parents did dumb things and raised us in ways where they made a couple of mistakes, but there was basic, vanilla parent raising.
Yeah.
I mean, kid raising. Because the parents do the raising. You don't raise your parents. Yeah. But my point is that I can't even imagine, because even like my totally normal upbringing, I had some sort of little cliques or parts of my life where I was kind of indoctrinated into something
absolutely.
where it was really hard for me to break out. But what if everything, your family, your friends, your school, your church, your society, your community, when you go to a movie at night, everything is this is it.
Yeah.
How do you break out of that? What's the switch that goes off in your human brain? Your brain that's literally been molded.
Yes, like she said, it's a part of her. It'll always be a part of her.
Yes. But how do you switch it off? I'm fascinated by that. And I wanted to really, I could have made the whole thing.
The whole hour could have been like, and then what moment at age 19, what happened? Age 20.
We just kept pressing her and pressing her, pressing her until finally she's like, okay, it was Dirty Dancing. Happy.
Yeah, I mean, I really am I have nothing.
No, it's,
Oh, Dirty Dancing.
Mm-hmm. I saw a remix of, is that what you call it when they put music? I sent it to you.
A remix?
They put different music to a scene from a movie and it syncs.
I don't know if that's a remix.
There was a remix I saw of something, whatever it is. I'm like 100. But it was the Muppets theme song to the scene where Patrick Swayze does his dance for whatever her name is. Yeah. It was pretty good. I sent it to Jordan and he told me it was the oldest man thing I'd ever sent him in my life.
Oh.
So
I don't know. That sounds funny to me. It
was on his birthday.
That's an old lady thing to say.
It's okay. It's okay.
And another thing we hardly touched on, but obviously it's like a whole other can of worms. And in some ways, I think is actually like a way bigger problem, but just the entire LGBTQ plus.
Yeah, but that's its whole episode. That's its own episode.
You're right. That's its
own
episode.
It's double torture.
It is double torture.
If you're gay or anything not heterosexual, this is like a life of torture. If they find out, because I'm sure a lot of people are like, well, I don't have to have sex. Oh, I'm not allowed to even think about having sex until marriage, so I can just hide. And I'm sure a lot of them do. You have these non-heterosexual feelings, but you're being told that you can't even think about sex. You're like, oh, that's great. I don't have to tell anybody. I can just hide forever. It's awful.
I hope it didn't seem like we were making light of this because I wanted to have a degree of levity around a topic that is so serious.
Well, I think we're celebrating her escape.
Yeah. I just think, it is traumatic. Like the word trauma is just, in doing my research for my notes for this episode, like the word trauma just kept cropping up. Like it really is not just, I am uncomfortable getting naked and having sex. Like it's so much deeper than that. And involves just sort of loathing your own body as a sexual creature.
And also, as another disclaimer, I don't judge anyone who decides on their own volition. Yeah. Is it under your own volition? Why is everything I'm saying today, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Of your own volition.
Yeah. Of your own
volition. Of?
What did I say?
Under. I don't think it's under volition.
Of your own volition?
Yeah.
Yeah, of your own volition.
I'm
going to say it again.
You're making me doubt myself. Okay. So
I'm saying even if it is of your own volition?
Yes. Does
that sound right?
Of your own volition. I think so.
By your own volition? Through your own volition? Under your own volition?
I think it's of.
Of.
I'm going on the record, and you guys can come after me.
All right,
I'm
so
saying
take 7. even if it's of your own volition.
Yes. What were you saying?
No, that's not what I was saying. Let me start again. Take 8. If it is under your own volition, I have absolutely
under.
If you want to do it yourself, if you're like, I want to do this. I have no judgment. Yeah. That's your choice. It's a free country.
That's what gets me is the judgment cast on people who don't.
Yeah.
Like the way if you are not pure, you're damaged, and the judgment, you might not be saying it explicitly, but what you are saying is people who do choose to have sex before marriage are damaged.
Right. As absurd as that is, I think it's also wrong to judge someone who decides on their own, under their own free will. No, by. Why is this hard? I can't speak English?
But I agree. I really believe in you do you. My issue with this is how it does make people, like, I do think it inflicts a lifetime of shame on a person. And I actually meant to ask her, it was on my list, but I wanted to ask, can shame be unlearned?
Oh, that's a whole other
episode, right?
Another episode.
Yeah, I feel like at some point we will have an episode about shame because we wrap every episode talking about
there's
shame.
been a lot of shame recently.
Yeah. Okay, I think we can wrap there officially after
Yes.
having touched on shame. If you enjoyed what you heard today, you know what we will ask of you, and that is to
Tell your friends.
like,
Subscribe.
follow us on Instagram and
Hit the notification bell.
TikTok,
And TikToks.
and generally do
Do all the things
that you would do
that
to
you would do
to support
to support,
a podcast that you
like,
and consume.
yeah.
And on that note, that's a wrap. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Dear Shandy. Bye-bye.